Hello fellow entrepreneurs, my name is Liza, back for another video talking about how to do a startup as I go through it. I'm very excited for 2020. I have a lot of content planned out that I want to talk about, so we're just gonna hop into it. And yes, I'm in a different background today. I'm upstate for the weekend, just getting a couple of things in order, getting over my jet lag, so that I can come in fresh for the new year and really get a ton done. So today I'm going to talk about the most interesting parts of your business. The accounting. No, don't go away, don't click off just yet. I know that it's not what you want to talk about. I know that you want to talk about your product and your customers and your growth and everything very interesting. And you don't want to be talking about accounting. But I can guarantee you that no matter what business you have, you will need to do the accounting one way or the other, and if you don't do it right, it can be a killer. So today I'm going to talk about the different things you have to think about with accounting, whether or not it's worth it to you to outsource it, how you can be most successful. So number one is bookkeeping. Now, I think it's a pretty common misconception that people think that bookkeeping and accounting are one and the same, when in fact, they are not. Bookkeeping refers to the literal recording of transactions as they occur. So let's say you own a shop. At the beginning of the day, you get in all the pre-orders for the day of about $100, and then throughout the day you spend $15 on your contract worker and another $30 on the different inventory that you need, and then $10 of sort of petty cash and expenses. The bookkeeping is when you literally write out each of those things. So income, $100. You literally list it out, usually in like almost a spreadsheet format, so that you know exactly what every piece of money, every cent coming in or out is supposed to be, and what it was for, and what it's about. Ideally, you do this in your records. Your records match your bank account, and your bank account matches exactly what you were expecting to see in your bank account at any given time. And if not, oops. Now, a lot of people, they hire bookkeepers, usually part-time. It's rare that you have someone who is a full-time employee of a company doing bookkeeping. So is this something that you should invest in? Should you invest in getting a bookkeeper? My verdict is no. I believe that you should be doing your bookkeeping yourself, and here's why. One, you need to thoroughly understand everything about your business. You need to understand where your money is coming from. You need to know what you're spending money on. You need to carefully go over this. You can have a bookkeeper send you reports. I don't think it's good enough. I think you need to spend that time really going through what you do and do not spend on, so that you can assess whether you're really spending money on the right things. You can assess patterns, and you can assess what future things you could do. There's nothing that's going to be more impressive to an investor than when they say, listen, how are you going to maximize your profits? How are you going to maximize your revenues and cut your costs? And you, because you have a very thorough understanding of where all of your money is going, can rattle off, so-and-so percentage is going to inventory. We think we can half it if we are able to buy in bulk. You know, just very impressive stuff. My dog is trying to participate in this video. She's an entrepreneur too, aren't you? In addition, and this is a spoiler alert for the next section, if you do hire an accountant, they will need to know the information, and you are the best at providing that. There has never been a time in my whole life when you could just hand the books to an accountant and they will have zero questions. If that ever happens, magic, hold on to it forever. Usually they have a lot of questions. What does this mean? When did this actually occur, this transaction? Did it happen then, the actual exchange of money, or did it happen later, which is very relevant for accountants. If you have a bookkeeper middleman, it just creates an extra layer of someone talking to someone else, talking to you, and then you talking to someone else, talking to the accountant. Whereas it's much more efficient for you to have all of that knowledge on hand to be able to communicate that really effectively. So in conclusion, as much as you don't want to do this, as much as you want to spend your time doing anything else, you should do your own bookkeeping. The second thing I want to talk about is a pretty specific kind of accounting, and that is for payroll taxes. So when you hire employees, you are obligated to pay certain federal, state, city taxes, sometimes things like unemployment, and so on and so forth. Frankly, there's more to it than I can even imagine. It is tempting because it is a seemingly simple thing and you only have a couple of employees. It is tempting to simply do it yourself. So should you? My verdict is invest in a payroll accounting service. Payroll is really, really hard. The laws are very arcane, very difficult to get through. In addition, they tend to change the laws pretty frequently, and if you get it wrong, it can cost you thousands of dollars to correct. On the other hand, there are many services that are designed specifically to do payroll taxes and nothing else. And other HR benefits if you want to add health insurance, etc. Usually they charge only maybe $50 per payment, and if you do it where you do a payroll once a month as opposed to bi-weekly, that means you're only paying that $50 a month. It's not that bad, and it will just save you a lot of headaches and such in the future. Finally, there is the accountant. Now remember I said there is a difference between bookkeeping and accounting. Bookkeeping, you're listing every single one of your financial transactions as they happen, talking about what they were. Accounting is when you take those things and summarize them and fit them into different categories and statements. You might be familiar with, for example, the income statement or the balance sheet or the cash flow statement. All of that is drawn up by accountants, usually yearly and then eventually quarterly when you're a big business, or monthly even. It can be tricky to gauge what kind of category certain transactions fall into. That's why people become accountants. That's why you take accounting courses. I have taken accounting courses. So should you be investing in an accountant? My verdict is maybe. I personally do. And this is because, again, the downsides of getting this wrong can be huge. At a previous startup that I worked at, it was mainly funded off of government grants. The very first month we had to submit a report. There was an accounting mistake that my boss at the time made. Some sort of simple mistake, anyone could do it. But because of that mistake, it kept reverberating into the month afterwards. This meant that for 6 months straight, we were audited by the government every single month. And auditing is a time killer, and you cannot afford to be killing that time when you have a startup. You just can't spend the time doing that. On the other hand, if you do have an accounting background, you could be saving yourself some money. I don't think it's a lot of money. I don't think our accountants have been too terrible, and you can usually get pretty good rates, especially if you're doing your own bookkeeping well. I do it in QuickBooks. My accountant has access to my QuickBooks, which means that we can just bing, bang, boom. We can reconcile it with the bank account, which means that we match it all up. And I can just hand it off to the accountant. They have their questions. I resolve them. Done. Accountants are also pretty good at what they do usually, which means that there can be all kinds of things that you didn't realize going in that can save you some time, money, and hassle. For example, my accountants pointed out to me that since we incorporated in August, we don't have to declare our fiscal year until August. I was going to do January, which means that we would have had to have paid a full year's worth of taxes even though we weren't incorporated for the full year. This way, our fiscal year starts and ends in August, which means that we only had to pay the taxes that one time for the whole year. And that's just a very small example. They know all kinds of other things too that will make sure that you're not overpaying in taxes. So in my opinion, it's a pretty good investment, but I do know of others who have owned companies and have done their own accounting for the first several years until they're really off the ground. At that point, I think it is a personal choice. But I would still say get the accountant, if you can afford it. Bookkeeping also means that you can do some financial projections. I will talk in another video about how to do some financial projections for your startup. I actually have a system for this, and so I will provide it to you guys in another video. The last thing I would say is if you're looking for an accountant, here are a couple of things to look for. You need someone who is extraordinarily detail-oriented, and this is coming from someone who's much more big picture, but you need to find someone who is ingrained in the details, because it's those small things that you don't catch that can end up being a real hassle later on. I also suggest finding someone who at least has some interest in your company or has experience in your area. Like if they've done tech companies before, for example, then that's helpful just because they might know some of the specific ins and outs of doing a tech company, especially in your state or city. It's nice to have that knowledge. I personally like going with smaller companies in general, and I like it for accountants too. It gives you much more one-on-one time, which actually ends up saving you a lot of time down the road. Again, I will make another video about that. Finally, try to make sure that the accountant that you use uses the same bookkeeping software that you want to use. And if you don't care about what you use, make sure you just use whatever software that they are used to using, because there's no point in having to learn a whole new software for everyone if you can just do it their way from the get-go. It's just much easier, trust me. Okay, so that's all of my advice about bookkeeping and accounting, but I wanted to kick off 2020 with something really useful that you could use right now, especially since a lot of people might be thinking about taxes now that the year's over and tax season will be coming up before you know it. So those are just some things to think about. Please consider liking this video, subscribing to my channel, sharing this with any friends of yours who are interested in entrepreneurship, and they can come here and ask me questions and hear about the journey from someone who's living it. All right, guys, that's my time. Thank you very much, and I hope you had a happy new year.